My name is Charles or Charlie Givens, but due to circumstances I have been called lame for many years now, so I answer to that name too. My father was a farm worker, and my mother was a housewife who took care of me and my three younger sisters. It was a time when here in Britain people were born, lived, and died in the same area. Imagine that owning a car was rare. Most families relied on public transportation. Television was limited to two channels and was black and white, and few families had a telephone. I could go on, but I hope you get the picture. Times were tough. We were the post-war baby boom generation. Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining or trying to live in the past, but to understand this story, you have to realize that computers, cell phones, the internet, instant communications, and video games were just on the horizon. Okay, we didn't have the advantages that today's youth have, but I think overall we had a better start in life than the current generation. In my opinion, the post-war baby boom generation took and used the best this world had to offer, and I fear that our legacy for our children and grandchildren is not as bright. The reason for my nickname goes back to when I was just 5 years old and in my first year of Catholic primary school. We were a Catholic family, although not very religious, but if you were Catholic, you went to Catholic school. It was November 5, 1953, and my parents took me to the local council's Guy Fawkes night fireworks show. It was a cold November evening, and we were standing far from the fire when the fireworks started. One stray firework flew into the sky, leaving a trail of red and orange in its wake, and then suddenly changed trajectory and headed straight towards us. My father pulled me away, but the fireworks hit my right leg and exploded, showering me with fire. I was later told that I was lucky that I did not lose my leg or my sight. If my father had not acted so quickly and put out the flames with his coat, I would have been disabled for life. As a result, I was left with scars on my arms and the right side of my face that will be with me forever. My right leg was not only burned, but also broken in two places. The hospital saved my leg, but it always remained shorter than the left one, and after the cast was removed, I walked with a constant limp due to muscle damage. So, when I returned to school 3 months later, I was quickly nicknamed Lane Givens. It could have been worse. Despite 4 surgeries, the right side of my face would have been permanently scarred, so I could have been called Scar. Children can be very cruel, and school bullies always target the weakest to test their strength. There were a few of these in my early years, but when they realized that I would fight back, they switched to easier targets. When we entered high school in August 1959, a personal enemy of mine named Bullet Barnes showed up. His father was a former military man and had just moved to our city. Bullet wasn't his real name, but because he was big for his age with short hair, one of his gym teachers gave him the nickname, and it stuck. He was 2 years older than me and 6 inches taller than me. He made my life miserable for the rest of my school years. I tried to fight back and fought him many times, but when you are 2 years younger and much smaller than your opponent, there is always one winner. I wasn't great academically in school, and I had a lot of excuses as to why that was, but I refused to use them. I was used to being the butt of teachers' ridicule when I couldn't answer questions that everyone else in the class seemed to know the answer to. From then on, I hated the Holy Fathers, who made up most of the teachers in our school. I think I started to believe them when they called me stupid. By the time I reached high school, I was assigned to a class where students were destined to work in the steel mills, fodder for the shipyards, which needed a constant stream of strong, healthy young men to build the ships that carried British exports around the world. I was not particularly strong, and because of my limp, I was never fast or agile enough to work in the shipyards. The only talent I had was that I could draw people, still lifes, or animals, and I could draw them accurately. Nowadays, in a different school and a different environment, this talent might have been nurtured and given a chance to blossom, but not in the early 60s. I met a girl at school when I was 14, and I thought she was amazing. Her name was Holly Miller, and her family had recently moved to our city. She had long red hair and green eyes, at least that's what I noticed when I first met her. Her father was a teacher at our school, and she sat next to me at morning roll call. We got along well, and she was the only one who called me by my real name besides my mother. We were inseparable, and everyone knew we were close. My father died when I was 11, and my mother struggled to make ends meet. I never had new things, but that didn't bother me, except when Holly asked me to take her to the school Christmas dance. I was embarrassed to admit that I didn't have money or suitable clothes, so I told her that I had another event planned that evening. She wasn't very happy with my refusal and went and asked Bullet Barnes to take her. Despite the fact that he was 2 years older than Holly, he immediately agreed. Holly was the most beautiful girl in school with long red hair, and even at 14 she had well-developed breasts, which made all the boys look at her with admiration and lust. On the evening of the dance, I stood at the school gate and watched as he accompanied her. The way she looked at him and smiled made me want to go up and fight him, even though I knew he would beat me easily. After my refusal, she and Bullet became a couple and rarely saw each other apart. He always tried to hold her close to him when I was around. He looked at me with a grin. One of his last fights was when I was 15, and I overheard him bragging to his friends and their girlfriends about going out with Holly. He looked at me as he said this, and his eyes challenged me to do something about it. I didn't disappoint him, and I think he thought I was easy prey as he evaded me, teasing me to catch up with him, which he knew I could never do. Eventually, they must have gotten tired because they walked away, leaving me with ridicule and laughter about Lane Givens and his lame leg. Holly heard about this incident and my attempt to defend her honor, and came to thank me in front of the whole school. She told me, "Ignore him. Bullet Barnes never made it past the first stage with me. I'm sorry you got involved, but it was very nice of you." Having said this, she leaned over and kissed my right cheek, ignoring the scar, and then left. I left school at the age of 15 in the summer of '63 and went straight to work for a local construction company. I was hired only because the foreman was a friend of my mother. Well, he was more than just a friend, and he felt he owed her. Since I was not fit to work on scaffolding or ladders, I was taught to use a cement mixer and operate a dump truck or forklift as needed. I was only about 5 feet 4 inches tall, but I was growing quickly. By my 16th birthday, I was already 5 foot 8 and had gained a lot of muscle. Lifting bags of cement into a cement mixer and shoveling sand and cement quickly got me into shape. There was little free time, but during lunch breaks, I drew my colleagues as they ate their sandwiches and drank tea. I always showed them the results of my efforts, and many of them took the drawings home to show their wives. At 17, I was fully formed and stood at 5 feet 9 inches and weighed 13 stone. It was all muscle, and I had become fairly confident in my abilities, but I still wasn't with a woman. It wasn't that I didn't try, but when the girls I approached saw my disfigured face, they backed down. It was painful, believe me, it was very painful. It was the 1960s, and everyone was talking about the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Animals, and the Merseyside Sound. Miniskirts and long hair were in fashion. Carnaby Street ruled, and everything was in motion. Somehow, all this passed me by. I was fond of music, and, together with my friends, I thought about girls most of the time, and in the evenings I tried to get under their skirts. In this, I was especially unlucky. I always ended up with a good girl who saved herself for Mr. Binwright, or one who looked like she was deprived of beauty genes. It was Christmas, just before my 18th birthday, when Holly Miller came back into my life. Unfortunately, so did Bullet Barnes. My friends and I were in our local pub playing darts and having a drink when Bullet walked in, followed by a few of his mates and their girlfriends. I noticed Holly immediately, and my stomach began to churn. She was stunningly beautiful. Her hair was still red, but no longer long. She had it cut in a pageboy style that accentuated her long neck. She was wearing a long coat, but when she took it off to reveal a short minidress that didn't hide her figure, I gasped. She looked around, as if to check if everyone had noticed her, but she didn't need to worry. Not even the old people, sipping their beer, fell silent in admiration. She hung up her coat, and Bullet handed her a drink. It was my turn to throw, and I had a chance to double hit to win. But I was still confused, my brain was off, my stomach was growling, so it was no surprise that I missed all 3 darts, much to the amusement of my best friend, Andy Connor. He took his darts and finished the game with a finish of 151 points. The loser had to buy drinks, so I went to the bar and ordered a round. Bullet must have recognized me and shouted to his friends, "It's Lame Givens. How are you, Lame, still disfigured and limping?" I ignored him. He was clearly drunk and looking for a fight. I took our drinks and he grabbed my hand, causing some of the beer to spill out of both glasses. He laughed and I turned to put the glasses down. He tugged at my shoulder and the beer spilled onto his jeans. I laughed and ordered 2 more drinks when he tried to hit me. I dodged his wild blow and said, "Bullet, you are drunk and in no condition to start a fight. Just sit with your friends and relax." He didn't intend to do this. This time I fought him back. "I'm a lot bigger and stronger now, you feel, so why don't you do as you're told and sit down?" This time he did as he was told and sat down, muttering curses and swearing revenge on me. I just laughed and continued playing darts. A little later, I felt someone touch my arm and looked back to see Holly smiling. I felt my heart stop as I looked into her deep blue eyes. "Aren't you going to say hello to me?" she asked. "I thought you were with Bullet," I answered, nodding at the dozing Bullet sitting in the corner chair. "I'm not used to hitting on other people's girls, even if it's very tempting in this case." He invited me to go with him and his friends to the dark side, as he calls it. "I'm not his girlfriend or anything, and I didn't think I'd meet you again," she replied. "Dark side? Is that what you call the King's Head? This is my local pub, and I love it here. This is a hard worker's pub, and we're proud of it. If you're looking for fancy cocktails and wine spritzers, go to the Golden Plow. It's a local high-end establishment that your friends are used to." "My friends? What do you mean by my friends? We have as much right to be here as you and your friends do," she said, contempt evident in her voice. After that, there were a few more words, and she left, dragging Bullet to her feet. She needed the help of 2 of his friends to lift him, and they half pulled, half carried him out the door. I turned to see Andy Connor grinning at me, and he laughed, saying, "You're in love, boy. She's too good for you. Better forget about her and leave her alone." "You're wrong this time. I barely know her, for God's sake. I haven't seen her for 3 years or more since she left for university, and based on one short conversation you're saying I'm in love. You're wrong, not right at all." Andy turned to the others and asked, "What do you guys think? Did he fall in love or not?" The general consensus was that I was truly in love. I refused to admit it, even to myself, but that night's sleep was hard to come by as I lay there thinking about how I had just missed a golden opportunity to talk to the girl of my dreams. Christmas Eve arrived, and we celebrated. In those days, every Friday and Saturday, there were 3 or 4 live bands playing in the dance halls. No disco, no, these were real live bands. To be fair, some of them were pretty terrible, and the band playing on stage when I encountered Holly again were doing a terrible rendition of the Beatles' Christmas hit from last year. We can work it out. This time Bullet By was sober and talking with my friends. Seeing me approaching, he stood in my way. I tried to move around him, but he moved to block me. This made me a little angry, but what the hell, it was Christmas, so I just shrugged and turned away. I must have been 15 feet away when I heard a warning cry. If he had hit his target, I would have been confused, but he missed. There was a fight. Everything happened in a matter of seconds and so quickly that even the bouncers did not have time to react. I turned and walked back to my friends. His friends helped him to his feet, and they crept towards the bar. A couple of hours later, I was chatting with friends and happened to see Bullet on the dance floor with Holly. She looked like she was pretty drunk, as she had trouble getting up and fighting off his hands when he tried to take advantage of her drunken state. I was determined not to interfere, so I continued to monitor the events in the hall. Holly was fighting a losing battle. It was no use, I needed to do something, so I walked over and asked her if she needed help. She might have been drunk, but not so drunk that she didn't realize she needed help if she wanted to fend off his advances. He became angry and told me to fuck off. I objected to this. There was a fight again. The bouncers grabbed us both and led us to the exit. I looked for Andy and saw him holding Holly, and he just nodded and motioned that he would meet me outside. We were both thrown out of the hall. Bullet was all for continuing the fight, but was on patrol with the police, expecting just such an event, and he once again told me that he was going to take revenge, but his wrist was clearly bothering him. He ran away when he saw the bouncers approach police with a knife and tell them what happened. And he brought Holly out after me to check I was okay. I walked Holly home, and at her front door, she pulled me close and kissed me. I asked if I could see her again, and she gave me her parents' phone number. I spent Christmas with my mom and sisters, and it wasn't until Boxing Day that I worked up the courage to call Holly. Her mother answered when she asked, "Who can I tell you is calling?" I told her, and she straight up called me out for bringing her daughter home so drunk on Christmas Eve. I tried to deny it, but she only stopped ranting when Holly snatched the phone from her hand. She apologized to me and asked, "Why don't you come and explain what happened? I want to see you again, but first we need to figure this out. All I remember is a fight and you taking me home. Please tell me you'll come." So it was with some trepidation that I went to meet the wolf and his bitch in their lair. I was received coldly, and after I told them about the events of Christmas Eve, they somewhat reluctantly thanked me for helping their daughter. That first meeting set the tone for my entire future relationship with her parents for the coming year. Holly and I went on a few dates before she had to go back to university. Our second date was New Year's Eve, and things got pretty hot. We were in my mother's living room. Mother was with her friend and told me not to wait until the morning for her return and not to do anything stupid. She knew Holly would come tonight. I was excited. In those days, there were very few places where you could take a girl, especially in winter. I didn't have a car, so that was out of the question, and her parents never left us alone for more than 5 minutes when we were there. My mother must have been a psychic or something. I didn't have sex protection. You couldn't buy them at any corner store or gas station in those days. No, they could only be bought at the pharmacy, where the sellers would most likely be the young girls you went to school with. It was awkward to make such a purchase from someone you knew or went to school with. I knew that word would spread, and every girl courted would have her morals questioned. In any case, I had never had the need to purchase such things before, as I was still not intimate with any woman, and neither was Holly when I asked if she had taken precautions or if she could offer any protection. She was understandably upset and asked indignantly, "What kind of girl do you think I am?" I explained my dilemma, and we laughed at the fact that we had both never had sex before. I said, "You can probably understand why I'm still like this, but with a face like mine and a lame leg, I'm not exactly the luck of the season. You must have a very strong will not to give it up now." I realized that I had interfered in this again, and hurriedly tried to cover myself by saying, "I mean, you must already have a lot of opportunities," and immediately realized that he had just made even bigger balls out of it. Holly laughed at me and said, "If I were you, I'd stop digging. I know what you're trying to say, and yes, I've had a few opportunities to have sex with my boyfriends, but once or twice they chose the timing. Either I had started having girl days, or there was no privacy in the dorm. It always seemed like there was some kind of obstacle in the way. I'm glad it's here now. I want to meet for the first time someone I've always liked and I know will be caring and affectionate." At the same time, she said, "Everything will be okay if you are careful. I want this, and I want you to make me a woman." We made love. It was almost midnight when she jumped up and said, "Let's go to the square and celebrate the new year there." Later, as I walked her home through the park, we talked about whether we had a future together. She said, "I need to finish university, and I don't want to be tied down right now. Please, I love you very much, but I want to live a little before I settle down." I was hurt and decided to use an all-or-nothing strategy, so I stopped and took her in my arms, took a deep breath and said, "I think I fell in love with you back when you first sat next to me in that school class. You were the only girl who simply ignored my disfigured face and spoke to me without condescension or pity. I fell in love with you then, and when I saw you walk into the Queen's Head a few weeks ago, I realized that my feelings haven't changed. I love you and want to be with you always." She pulled away from me and sat down on a park bench. She was silent for a few minutes and then said, "Charlie, you are the sweetest, honest, and trustworthy person I have ever met, but I'm just not ready for that kind of commitment. There are still many things in life that I want to experience before I settle down. I want to date other men, and yes, if the right opportunity and person arises, go to bed with them. I love you more than anyone else I've ever met before. That's why I gave myself to you tonight. Perhaps someday in the future we will be together again, but not now. Sorry, but I'm just not ready." There was no point in pushing for a commitment. She clearly wasn't ready for that kind of relationship, so I settled for what I could get. We dated a couple more times before she left for university and disappeared from my life, or so I thought. After work one cold Friday in February, I found Holly waiting for me outside my mother's house. She was shivering from the cold, and I asked her why she didn't knock and asked my mother to let her wait inside. I was too afraid she would immediately understand why I was here. I quickly took her with me, and my mother, looking at us, led us into the living room. Holly waited until we were alone and then said very simply, "I'm 6 weeks late, and I've never been this long before. I think I'm pregnant, and you're the father," and then burst into tears. I tried to calm her down, and finally she calmed down enough to listen to me. My first instinct was to ask if this was my child, but deep down I knew it was, and quickly suppressed any thoughts that it could be someone else. I tried to sound confident. "Well, the first thing we need to do is confirm it, and then decide what we're going to do. I'll marry you. Do you know how I feel about you? I love you, and I will love our child. I don't want my child to be illegitimate. Have you thought about what you want? Not being pregnant, that's what. Look what trouble I'm in." Then she burst into tears again, just as my mother returned with a kettle for us. She took stock of the situation at one glance and asked Holly, "What term are you in?" This brought another flood of tears from Holly, and her mother took her into the kitchen to talk. I wanted to go after them, but she turned to me and said, "Son, you have already caused enough trouble. I warned you to be careful. Now leave us, and we will see what can be done about this mess you both got yourself into." They spent more than 2 hours there before returning. Holly looked much better, and Mom looked at me and said, "I take it you'll be next to her?" It wasn't a question, but more of an order, so I confirmed that I would. Mom was a wise woman and then said, "Holly came back scared, and unbeknownst to her parents, we'll leave it that way for now. She will spend the night here, and tomorrow we will go to the city to see the doctor." I was about to say something, but she stopped me. "Before you ask, she will be spending the night with Mary, so no fun tonight. Do you understand me, Charles?" I just nodded in confirmation. When my mother calls me Charles, I know that she is very angry with me. The next day they went together and returned with confirmation that Holly was pregnant. Things moved quickly after that. We met her parents and told them we wanted to get married and why. You probably guessed that they were not very happy and called me every possible name. We didn't have money for rent, so they offered to give us a room in their house. It wasn't ideal, but my mom didn't have enough space in her house, so we were grateful for their offer. The wedding was quickly organized, and the local priest performed the ceremony with Andy as our best man and Mary as our maid of honor. After the short ceremony, we left for a weekend honeymoon in the Yorkshire Dales. We were both very inexperienced in sex. Hell, we didn't even know each other very well, a couple of dates, and now we were husband and wife. My mom gave Holly a book about sex called The Guide to Great Sex. I told you she was psychic. We used it on our honeymoon and many nights after. Holly was more relaxed than me. Since the deed was already done and she was pregnant, we had sex very often. It was all over too quickly, and we were back to reality and life with her parents. Our honeymoon gave us 2 days to get to know each other. I tried very hard to prove my love for her in the weeks and months that followed. I realized that she missed the freedom that university life provided. She was a social outcast, with her friends refusing to talk to her and openly ignoring her on the street. Her only real friends were my sister Mary and Andy. When she was going through her morning sickness phase, I felt that at times she despised me for getting her pregnant and causing her such inconvenience. At first, the relationship with her parents was tolerable, but in the following months, as Holly began to show, her mother in particular began making snide remarks about me ruining her daughter's education, then about my manners and complaints about me coming home dirty, work clothes and boots. I tried to change my clothes after work, but I still had to bring dirty clothes home to wash. This caused another wave of complaints until one day I lost patience and said that I would wash my own clothes. This gave her even more reasons to be dissatisfied. I worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. It may not seem that difficult, but it was hard physical work, and I came home absolutely exhausted. Living with her parents turned into open hostility. I hated living under their roof, and our sex life suffered as Holly was quite loud and wouldn't let me make love to her when her parents were home. They rarely came out. Somehow we survived this pregnancy, and Holly gave me a son. We named him Roy after her father. Having a grandchild to care for eased some of the tension with her parents. They were no longer openly hostile or trying to humiliate me in front of Holly, or at least not in front of me. While waiting at the hospital, fathers were required to remain in the waiting area outside the delivery room. Husbands were not encouraged to be present at the birth of a child in those days. To pass the time, I used my notebook to doodle with the nurses and ward visitors. I wasn't really concentrating on the plot, just drawing, when one of the doctors stopped and looked at what I had drawn and said the resemblance was amazing. I looked closely at what I drew, and it was one of the nurses working on paperwork at her desk, and it was a pretty close likeness. She came over when the doctor called her and was surprised by the sketch. She asked if she could have it, and the doctor said jokingly as I was about to hand it to her, "Better let him sign it, you never know, it might be worth a fortune in a couple of years." I looked to her for advice, and she nodded, so I simply signed lame and included the date 1967. She looked at the signature and immediately understood why I signed it that way. She asked me when I got the leg injury and the burn on my face. I told her, and she advised me to see a doctor, as there were now new methods that could help with my shortened leg. She also suggested that I ask my doctor to refer me to a plastic surgeon, as she believed that something could now be done about my facial scar. I promised her that I would consider this option, and she returned to her duties. I thought a lot about what she suggested over the next few hours and decided it was worth a try. I did speak to my doctor, and he referred my case to an orthopedic consultant, but also warned that it would be several months before I would be contacted. Waiting lists for NHS patients in those days were no better than they are today. I was able to save enough money that Holly and I could rent our own place. It was a 2-room apartment in a disadvantaged part of the city, but close to my current workplace. We moved there straight from the hospital. Andy helped us move as he had a small van, which he called his passion van. Holly joked with him about using the mattress in the back of the van. He told her that she would have to come with him one night if she wanted to find out. The flirting was good-natured, and I knew he would never do anything to hurt me or ruin my marriage. He was little Roy's godfather, and Mary was his godmother. Life fell into a routine. It was not easy for both of us. Holly was constantly tired from caring for a demanding child, and I was exhausted from working as many hours as I could to keep up with our bills. Within 2 months, Holly had regained her previous figure, albeit with enlarged breasts due to breastfeeding our son. This had to be stopped when our baby's upper and lower teeth erupted as he bit her and even cut her once until she bled. Our sex life has resumed. Holly had a long chat with our parish priest, and he made it clear what the church's position is on pregnancy protection. Basically, he advised that good Catholics should only use the rhythm method, but Holly told him she wanted to go back to university and another child was not in the plan. This conversation cooled her faith in the church, which was run by priests who had no experience of marriage, and she stopped attending services regularly. We both tried to attend church at Christmas and Easter, but that was the maximum. We got along just fine without confession and communion. I asked her about the possibility of taking the pill, which had been available in the UK since the early 60s. Holly was worried about possible side effects and didn't want to take them. I think she was mainly worried that they might lead to weight gain. She worked hard to get her figure back, and did not want to compromise on this matter. In due course, I met with an orthopedic consultant, and he scheduled me for surgery within the next 12 months. After 15 years, I was finally going to walk without a limp. The other side of the coin was that I would be in a cast for 2 months without earnings, only hospital payments. I was worried and wanted to cancel the surgery, but Holly insisted I go ahead with it. Holly made friends with a few other mums to be at the prenatal class, and they started going to the local bingo hall on Wednesday nights. I had no objection to her going out. She needed to get out of the house sometimes, and bingo gave her a break from me and Roy, even if only for a few hours. Among them, the girls were quite lucky, and if one of them won, they would go to the pub for a drink before returning home. I didn't mind it either, but she started smoking again. I never smoked, it was too expensive even then, and she quit during pregnancy, and I thought she quit for good. But one evening she came back smelling of cigarette smoke. Usually the smell was only on her clothes, since smoking was allowed in all entertainment establishments in those days, but when she kissed me, I smelled the nicotine and complained about it. After that, she always chewed mint gum, and her breathing became much better. Shortly before my surgery, Holly returned from bingo full of joy. She won the jackpot, over £300. It was a fortune, about 4 months' earnings for me, and would have been enough for the duration of my incapacity. The operation was successful, and it took me 3 months to recover. Luckily, my boss saved my job, so I was able to come back. While recovering in the hospital, I continued to sketch and even did oil paintings to pass the time. One of the doctors told me about a new oncology ward that was about to open and said there was a competition to choose original artwork for the reception area and I should apply. The problem was that I didn't know what to draw. Holly suggested painting a portrait of the original house that once stood on what is now the hospital. The house was so badly damaged by fire during World War II that it had to be demolished. The hospital itself was named after the home's original owner, and his family was one of the main funders of the current facility. She went to the local library and found an old photograph of a pre-World War I house, and I drew my application from that photograph. A few weeks later, I was told that my entry had won the competition, and with it came a check for £500. Holly and I attended the opening ceremony and watched as a descendant of the original sponsor, Lord Stevens, officially opened the new branch. Later, he approached me and asked me to come to his house tomorrow. He had a proposal for me. The next day, I went to see him, and he asked me to paint his portrait and that of Lady Stevens. He said he would pay me £50 if he liked the result. It was good money, although not very generous, but I never refuse gifts, so I accepted the offer, and 4 weeks later I presented him with the job. He was delighted and intrigued by the signature at the bottom. I told him the story of the lame man, and he was quite amused. After that, I had several other portrait commissions and tried my best to keep up with them. I did some quick calculations and realized I would never be able to make a living as an artist. £500 was a rare bonus, so as soon as I was strong again, I returned to working life. While I was on sick leave, Holly and I had plenty of opportunities to make love, and we took full advantage of it, always being careful, but something went wrong one of these times. A month later, she told me that she was pregnant again. She was unhappy. Roy was only 2 years old, and she had hoped to continue her studies at night school with the goal of returning to university, but now it was just a dream. I was secretly happy, but worried about how we would cope financially. Our daughter Sarah was born 8 months later, and life continued. We managed to keep our heads above water, as I was now making more money as a construction foreman. I also bought a small van and picked up other workers on my way to work. This helped cover operating costs. We worked within a 50-mile radius of home, and I was paid to give them rides. Our sex life continued irregularly. Holly was always tired and did not show the same enthusiasm that she had previously had for sex. She also started taking pills. During this period, I often wondered why she did this, because we had sex once or twice a month, usually right after her women's days, so there was almost no chance of getting pregnant. By the time little Roy was ready to start school and Sarah was enrolled in daycare, Holly began looking for work, but the chances of finding anything suitable for her were slim. Working part-time in an office to accommodate school hours was nearly impossible. Finally, one evening when I came home, she told me she had been offered a part-time job. I decided to show my enthusiasm for her initiative and asked for more details. She looked visibly nervous as she said, "It's just Friday and Saturday nights at Badger's Corner from 5 to 11:30. They advertised for barmaids and I applied. I had an interview today and Mr. Evans asked if I could start this Friday." I didn't like this option, but I wanted to see what she thought about it, so I answered, "It's not for me to decide, you need to work. We don't really need the extra money that much, we're fine as is, but do you want to do this?" She answered immediately, "Yes, I do. The extra money will help us buy a car instead of this dirty old van. The kids are getting too big to get into the van. The car will be much more practical, and I can take driving lessons and stop using buses to go shopping." Her decision was made before she even walked through the door. She just wanted me to agree so there wouldn't be any reproach from me when she came back too tired for sex. Up to this point, we had been making love on average twice a week, but Fridays and Saturdays were off the schedule, and now it looked like Thursdays would be busy too. Not wanting to disappoint her, I said, "Let's try before Christmas. If it gets too hard, you can tell them to find someone else." Something about this new proposal didn't feel right to me. The John Evans I knew never allowed darts teams in his establishment. He said they caused too many problems and disturbed the neighbors at the end of their evening entertainment. He didn't want to deal with the darts teams. I asked Holly, "When did John Evans change his mind about darts teams? He never allowed them in his pub before." "Oh," she replied, "John is no longer the owner. It is now Mr. and Mrs. Lee, Manny and Sylvia Lee. They took over the running of the pub last month. John has decided to retire as his wife is ill, and he needs to look after her." Anyway, some of the regulars approached Manny and asked if they could form a team, and he said why not? It was a good way to increase sales on a usually dead night like Thursday. That's how it all happened. This was the first time I had heard of the change, and my first thought was who was bringing her home now that John was no longer in the business. Second question, why didn't she tell me about such an important event for me? Because she knew that this was one of my main concerns when she took this job. I was angry and blurted out, "Who brings you home now?" "Manny or Sylvia, but usually Manny. He's talking about arranging taxis for Friday and Saturday nights, since he has a lot of work to do after hours. The brewery wants sales data on orders every Monday morning, and he likes to keep his Sundays relatively quiet, so he does the bookkeeping after closing every night." Now, I had never met Manny or his wife, John. I knew and trusted, and I wanted to know more about Manny Lee before making judgments about his character. I was worried that he might try to take advantage of Holly, especially if she was drinking like she was that night. I looked at Holly more closely, but other than the fact that her usually flawless lipstick was missing from her lips, she seemed the same as usual. I noticed that her skirt was one of the shortest in her wardrobe and her blouse was sheer, allowing her bra to be clearly visible. She had worn this outfit several times before, but told me that she felt uncomfortable with the sheerness of the blouse and stopped wearing it. So why was she wearing it today? I didn't have concrete evidence, but I felt there was more to it than she was telling me. I decided not to start an argument until I had more information, and it was agreed that she would work additional evenings until Christmas, and then we would discuss again. The next day, Saturday morning, I called Andy and told him the facts, as I knew them, about the conversation between Holly and me the previous evening. He played darts for our local pub and said he knew that Badger's Corner had put 2 teams into the league. He also informed me that the leading player on the Badger Corner team was none other than Bullet Barnes. But I thought he lived abroad, I blurted out. Bullet left town rather suddenly, shortly after Holly and I got married 7 years ago. We never found out why, but there were rumors that he was harassing some girl, and his father paid the girl's family to keep quiet with the condition that Bullet leave town. Now he was back and Holly had to know about it. If he was now a regular customer at Badger's Corner, she couldn't help but know. Why didn't she tell me he was back? He came back about 6 months ago, Andy told me, and his dad got him a job as a manager at one of his car dealerships, so he has a lot of money and drives a Jaguar convertible. Good car. According to rumors, he hasn't changed. He's still the same thug and still the same arrogant. This was bad news and caused me great anxiety. I walked slowly home from Andy's. My head was in turmoil, full of conflicting thoughts. Holly was his girlfriend, or so he thought. According to her, they only dated occasionally and were never exclusive. I always doubted it. She clearly spent a lot of time with him in those days, but he had been away for almost 7 years and, as far as I knew, had never kept in touch with any of his old friends. I knew that Holly received letters from a pen pal she had been in touch with since school, and that she also kept in touch with some university friends by mail, but I never opened her letters. Could she keep in touch with him? I didn't know what to think, but I knew I had to do something. When I came home, it was the middle of the day and the children were watching TV. Holly was in our bedroom getting ready for work. I was going to wait until tomorrow when we would have the whole day to talk, but my anger wouldn't let me wait. I watched as she carefully applied her makeup. She was wearing a robe, and I could see her black half-cup bra showing as she raised her hands to fix her hair. She looked at me, standing and watching her actions, and smiled. I thought that she never puts so much emphasis on her appearance and makeup when we go somewhere, but for her fans at work, she is willing to spend a lot of time perfecting her look. I turned to see what she was going to wear tonight and saw that she had prepared a dress that I had never seen before. It was one of those dresses that buttoned from the V-neck to the waist, with a narrow belt that accentuated her small waist and accentuated her full breasts. Suddenly jealousy overtook me, and I just lost my temper and started speaking harshly. Why didn't you tell me that Bullet Barnes was back in town? Did you think I wouldn't find out? Not only will I find out that he has returned, but also that he is now a frequent visitor to Badger Corner and is picking on you again. Holly didn't even seem surprised by my attack. She just calmly turned to me and replied, "Your reaction now is exactly why I didn't tell you. I've tried to bring this up a few times recently, but the timing never seemed right. As for him picking on me, he does what most other customers do every night. You always knew that I flirt with them and give them a little show to keep them interested, and you never complained before. In fact, it seems to turn you on to others like your wife. So don't start whining about for Bullet showing interest in me. That's more than you've done lately." With these words, she took off her robe and put on her dress. God, I thought, she is absolutely beautiful. I tried to pull her towards me, but she pushed my hand away and said, "Don't even think about it. I just did my hair and makeup, and I don't have time for this. You come here practically accusing me of having an affair with Bullet Barnes, and then you try to hit on me. Well, now you don't stand a chance. We'll talk tonight when I get back." Before I could stop myself, I said, "If you're sober enough to talk." She almost screamed, "What is this supposed to mean?" "Yes, I sometimes drink after work, so what? Sometimes I think I do this to gain strength to return home and face you and your eternal questions. You're damn right we'll talk tonight." She ran out of the room and went to work, but at least she stopped to kiss the kids before leaving. I sat on the bed, stunned. I replayed our conversation in my head, and the first thing I realized was, what did I say that made her think that I was accusing her of having an affair with Barnes? I looked at it over and over again, but still didn't see the connection. This in turn made me think that she was cheating on me with him, and perhaps suspects that I know more than I am letting on. I was completely confused and was taken back to the beginning of what I thought was the beginning of a downturn in our marriage. Last Easter, that was 5 months ago, Barnes had been back in town about 6 months ago, so the timing matched. Her general moodiness, except when we went to Mallorca, seemed to peak on weekends when she was working. It was no use. I decided to wait and talk to her about it in the evening, no matter how late she came home. I took care of the kids, fed them and bathed them, and then sat in front of the TV, pretending to watch Match of the Day. The program ended at 11:20 and I turned off the TV and went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I got up and went downstairs to sit in the dark and wait for her to return. I heard the sound of a car approaching and looked out the window. The street light wasn't working, so I couldn't see the car clearly, but I knew it wasn't a taxi. I expected to hear the car door slam, but almost 5 minutes passed before it happened. I stepped back from the window and listened to her heels click on the path to our door. Holly came in and turned on the light and took off her coat. She turned and screamed when she saw me standing there watching her. I looked at my wife and noticed that the top two buttons on her dress were not buttoned correctly. She saw where I was looking and calmly buttoned them up. She said, "You almost gave me a heart attack. I thought you'd be in bed." "Are you saying you wished I was in bed?" I answered. "So I wouldn't have noticed that it took you more than 5 minutes to get out of the car before going into the house. Who brought you home? It wasn't a taxi." "I'm not going to discuss this now. I'm tired and going to bed." This time I wasn't going to put up with her nonsense and delay tactics. I turned her around abruptly and sat her down on the sofa. "No, you damn well won't go," I said, seething with anger. I saw fear in her eyes because she had never seen me like this before. I was an angry and scared person, angry at her refusal to talk to me until she was ready and prepared her arguments, and scared that I was losing her. "Tired," she said. "Okay, Bullet brought me home tonight, but this is the first time he's done this. I was so mad at you for what happened earlier in the evening that when he kissed me, I responded. He took advantage of the situation and managed to unbutton the top buttons of my dress before I could stop him. But I stopped him. I want you to know that I am not cheating on you with him or with anyone else. Now you can trust me or no, as you wish. I will not allow you to constantly interrogate me silently with your eyes every night after work. I have done nothing to deserve your suspicions, and frankly, I am tired of constantly monitoring what I do, what I say, and how. I get dressed for work and always see this silent reproach in your eyes. You can either accept the fact that in my work I communicate with a lot of men, each of whom would like to sleep with me, and yes, I flirt with them, but no. This is where it ends. Now you need to decide whether you can live with it or not. It's your choice, but I can't live like this anymore." She got up and went to bed. I was going crazy again with mixed emotions. I wanted to believe her and mostly did, but one thing was missing from her outburst today. She never said she loved me. This was the most painful thing. When I thought about it, I couldn't remember her saying she loved me for over 6 months, and before that it was a very rare occurrence. When I went to bed and tried to kiss her goodnight, she resolutely turned away and, I think, pretended to be asleep. I lay there for 2 hours trying to sleep and finally got up and sat in the living room, staring into space. I don't know how long I sat there, but at some point I fell asleep and woke up to find that Holly must have covered me with a blanket. I returned to our bedroom, lay back in bed, and extended my hand to her. She turned and hugged me, and we both cried like babies. I told her I believed her, and she said, "I'm sorry I put myself in a situation where he could kiss me. I'll be a lot more careful when he's around. His hands are everywhere. I should have told you he's back to the city, but I just didn't find the right moment." She even suggested quitting work on Thursdays, but I told her to try it, and if either of us found it was starting to ruin us as a couple, she would stop there and then. We agreed that our marriage was more important than extra income. They say sex is best after reconciliation, but we didn't have a chance to test it in the morning as the kids came rushing in demanding food. We later caught up during the night, and the next evening, I really felt like we were back on the right track. The next month or two went pretty well. I've received a couple of commissions for real portraits, and I have to admit it's thanks to Holly's mother. Both paid well, and we were able to save money again. This was necessary because the country was gripped by inflation of 85%, and the situation was getting worse. Britain joined the EU and introduced restrictions on wages. The maximum salary increase was 3%. Countries in the Middle East were restricting oil supplies to the West, and as a result, every working man had to work only 3 days a week. In November, my doubts became relevant again. This time it was Andy, who hinted to me about some tricks at the Badger. I was having drinks with a few friends one Saturday when he pulled me aside and asked, "How are things going with you and Holly?" I instantly became wary and replied, "Fine, I think. Why do you ask?" I knew he wouldn't bring it up without a good reason, and my heart sank as I waited for his response. We played a darts match at the Badger last Thursday, a regular league. Towards the end of the evening, Bullet Barnes was at the bar talking to Holly, then started whispering something to her. She shook her head at whatever he was saying and walked away, but he called her back and told her something else, and she looked around the bar and just nodded in agreement. He started making noise again as usual and said, "I bet I'll make Holly take off her bra in front of everyone here." Everyone started jostling and whispering money was changing hands. Bullet held the book and wrote down the bets until he had a pile of notes in front of him. Then he called Holly and said, "Okay, Holly, for 50 pounds if you stand on the bar and take off your bra, are you in?" And he continued as I stood there, speechless, wondering what would happen next. He must have been joking, but he wasn't joking like that. He said, Holly looked at her boss, Manny, who nodded approvingly. She climbed up on the counter using a stool, with Manny trying to grab her bottom. She pushed everyone away and said she would stop if they continued. They stopped, and she stood there. Everyone, including me, held their breath as she reached for the sweater, but instead of taking it off as we all hoped, she slipped out of the sleeves, showing nothing but her belly button. She unclasped her bra, it was the front clasp, and took it off, one hand at a time, and finally raised it with a flourish for everyone to see. Honestly gimpy, she didn't show anything, and many began to grumble that they had bet money in vain. Bullet was smiling as he helped her down, and someone snatched the bra from her hands. She tried to give it back, but he held it above her head, out of reach, and she jumped a couple of times, trying to get it. You can imagine what happened. Her breasts were bouncing, and everyone could see how her nipples were hardening due to friction. Holly must have realized what was happening and went behind the bar, grabbed her coat and bag and left. Manny intervened at this point and said, "Okay, guys, you've had your fun. Now give Holly her bra back and you," he said, pointing at Bullet. "Pay her what you owe. She won the bet fair and square." To be fair, Bullet paid, and a red-faced Holly disappeared into the ladies' room to clean up. Holly didn't say a word to me about it when she got home that night and hasn't mentioned it since. I looked at Andy, unsure of what to say, when he added, "There's one more thing," he said, "and that's what made me ask how you were doing." I was afraid to speak, so he said the words I was afraid of. The last orders were placed soon after, and Holly began to collect the empty glasses. She walked over to the table where Bullet was sitting with a couple of his teammates. She reached for the glasses, but he spun her around and pulled her into his lap. It seemed to me that she wasn't trying too hard to get away, and he probably concluded the same thing when she took the opportunity to kiss him on the lips and managed to free herself from Manny's embrace. Intervened and yelled at Bullet, threatening to ban him from the bar if something like that happened again. Well, you know Bullet, he made a joke out of it and started making some smart comments about how they were old friends, and he didn't do anything like that, which he had not done before. He then boasted that he would get her before Christmas, and to prove it, he would take off her panties and put them in the trophy cabinet. I lunged at him, but my friends, knowing how close I am to both of you, held me back before I could get it. Actually, it's for the best, since he would have killed me. And he was only about 5'6" tall and weighed 10 stone when not wet. Bullet Barnes was about 6 feet tall and weighed almost 15 stone. I asked if that was it, and he said, "I think so, but while we were waiting for the taxi, Bullet drove up to the pub, and the next thing that happened was Holly came out of the pub and got into his car, and they drove off." "What time was it?" I asked reluctantly, afraid to hear his answer. "It was about 11:20 because as we were leaving, I heard Manny telling everyone it was time to leave. I think he was afraid he would lose his license if the police found someone drinking after closing, as he already warned about this. I also heard him tell Holly that she could go, he would finish here. He asked if she should call a taxi, and she replied that she didn't need a ride today." I remembered last Thursday and remembered that I was reading in bed when she arrived. I rarely fall asleep when she comes home late, so I checked the time and it was 12:15. The drive from Badger to home is no more than 10 minutes. Where has she been all this time? I felt sick and thanked Andy, saying I had to go. He offered to accompany me, and as we walked home, he apologized for bringing such bad news. He spent the whole weekend not knowing whether to tell me about it or not. To be honest, at least now I knew that Holly was hiding something from me, and I was risking her anger again, but I had to ask her. There was no other way. We needed to talk it all out and let it all work out, how it turns out. When I got home, the kids were at my sister's and Holly was sitting on the couch watching TV. I turned it off and just told her to shut up and listen when she started to object. This must have surprised her. I rarely act so rudely, and certainly not with her. She sat down and began to listen as I said, with more than a hint of snark in my voice, "I heard you took off your bra in Badger last week, and I also heard you got paid £50 for it. You're making money doing it now." She didn't look surprised and replied, "Bullet Barnes put me up to it, nothing special. When I came back to university after that last Christmas with you, and before I realized I was pregnant, we always needed money for beer. Then Bullet came up with an idea for this stunt. We walked into a busy bar. I was wearing tight clothes that emphasized my breasts and practically showed them, while he went around asking customers to chip in and raise money so that I could take off my bra in front of everyone. He made me rehearse this over and over again, until I could do it without taking off my blouse and showing nothing. Of course, the clients did not know this and expected to see my breasts. He was not greedy. He charged a couple of shillings from each, so they did not feel deceived when I performed. The trick was that Bullet was a master of charm if someone started to get angry, and his physical size was also intimidating. In the end, everyone lost no more than the cost of a pint. We did this 3 or 4 times before they started warning us. We were entering a new pub. "Okay," I said, my voice rising with indignation. "I can understand that it was a fun stunt with no real sacrifices when you were a student, but now you're a married woman, so why did you agree to do it again? Thought I wouldn't find out, and that I wouldn't be damn mad when I found out?" That evening, before all this happened, I was talking to Bullet about our need for a cheap and reliable car. He asked how much I was willing to pay, and when I said we only had £100, he said he had a used Mini and he could give it away for £150. I told him it was too expensive for us and went back to work as the client was waiting. Later, when he had a drink, he called me and said, "What if I do this bra trick right now? He's sure he'll get the £50 we need." I was tempted, but I said no. Then he talked to Manny, and Manny was the one who told me to go for it. That's why I did this stupid thing. I don't know why you're so angry. You used sketches of me where I did all sorts of things to make money, so I thought it would be normal, because no one saw anything. As for what you found out, I saw Andy that night and knew what he would say to you, so I asked him to remain silent. I knew right away that I shouldn't have done that. I hoped Andy would keep his mouth shut like he promised, but apparently he couldn't. I should have told you myself when I got home, but the opportunity slipped away. Andy didn't tell me anything about Holly telling him to keep quiet, but that was typical of him. The bra trick wasn't the only thing he felt the need to tell me about. The main thing that really bothered him was the incident at closing when you let that bastard Barnes touch you and kiss you. She thought for a minute, clearly trying to remember the incident, then her face turned red, and I realized that she remembered what I was talking about. "Oh, it was nothing. These things happen sometimes. It's part of the job." I admit, Bullet went too far then, and I let him know that it won't happen again. Holly looked at me and knew I didn't believe her, so she said almost playfully, "Listen, Charlie, a bartender has to flirt with customers if she wants to get good tips and not pay attention to some offers." That evening, the team celebrated their victory over last year's champions. Everyone was on edge. They tipped me well and weren't mad at me for the bra trick, so naturally some of them tried to grope me when they got the chance. Andy must have told you how. I reacted when they didn't want to return my bra. Another thing you need to know, And Andy probably already told you, I left work early that evening. Bullet drove me to look at the Mini. The car was parked on the site, and let's go see if it's right for me. I could only look from the outside since the keys were locked in the showroom. The car looks great, but I told Bullet that I wasn't sure. He said he would reserve it for me, but I should let him know. Until Monday evening if I want it. I think it's a good deal. Can we go look at it again tomorrow? I'm not going anywhere with Mr. Pierce fucking Barnes. I'll probably end up in jail for assault after what you told me. No, I won't, but I'll ask Andy to come with you to check out the car. If he thinks it's a good buy, then buy it. Holly jumped up and started hugging me. Her mood was indescribable, and one thing led to another, and soon we were having sex. She then said quietly, "It doesn't matter anyway. I told Manny I won't be working on Thursdays anymore. 3 nights in a row is too much, and it's not fair to you and the kids." A feeling of relief washed over me. I was going to insist that she stop working on Thursdays, but she saved me from having to demand it. It was time to pick up the kids, so I got dressed and went to pick them up, stopping at Andy's on the way to arrange for a Mini. He was more than happy to accompany Holly. He said jokingly, "You know, my ego gets bigger when I'm seen with a gorgeous woman like Holly. It'll make my ex-girlfriend jealous when she hears about it. You'd be lucky if a woman as gorgeous as Holly even looked at you." "I have my moments," he replied dryly, and I didn't doubt it. He asked what Holly said about Thursday night, and I told him the gist. He agreed that her explanation was plausible, and again disaster was averted thanks to her quick thinking, but now I was completely on guard. The next day he picked up Holly, and they went to check out the Mini. They came back with the news that she was now the owner and could take the car as soon as we paid the remaining amount. Andy pulled me aside and said quietly, "This is a good deal. The car is worth at least twice what she paid for it. Bullet must be taking a huge loss." As he left, Holly hugged him and kissed him quickly on the lips. If he was embarrassed, he would cover it up with a joke. "If you thank me like that, I can't wait for the next car." She turned and went back to prepare dinner, and he said to me, "By the way, her new car is quite noticeable." Seeing my questioning look, he added, "Remember the Michael Caine movie, The Italian Job? Her new car could be one of the ones used in the movie. It's bright red with a Union Jack on the roof." That night in bed, Holly and I made love. Later, Holly snuggled up to me and said, "Now that I don't work on Thursdays anymore, do you mind if I start going to bingo again?" I was relaxed, so nothing she could ask for would be refused. I just said, "Okay." After that, life returned to normal, or what we considered normal. Our love life stabilized at 3 to 4 times a week, and although the frequency was less than I really wanted, the passion we felt made up for it. Holly resumed going to bingo and even won one day. Not a fortune, but still nice. I imagine things would have continued as they were if I hadn't bumped into Kate, one of Holly's bingo friends, who casually mentioned, "Too bad Holly couldn't make it to bingo last week." My first thought was, bloody hell, because Holly left the house as usual last Wednesday and returned at the usual time of 10:15. I remember it so clearly because I was in the mood for sex and had to settle for a kiss and a cuddle as Holly said she was too tired for any sexual exercise that night, but she would be fine tomorrow, and indeed she was. The following Wednesday, I arranged for Mary to come to our house around 7 to look after the children. When I asked her about it, she looked at me and said, "It has to do with Holly, right?" When I simply nodded, tears streaming down my cheeks, she hugged me and said, "Fool, damn fool." I think she inherited the gift of foresight from our mother. She warned me that I had to hold on and not let what I saw or learned tonight lead me to violence. The last thing your children need is to see you behind bars. We agreed that she would arrive a little later than Holly's usual departure time. I left the back door unlocked for her. I waited until I heard Holly's Mini start up, then got into my van and followed her at a distance, letting a few cars wedge between us as we reached the main road into town. I followed her downtown and watched as she parked next to the bullet cart lot. Andy was right. Her car was easy to spot. The decoration on the roof made it very noticeable. I watched as he greeted her with a kiss at the showroom door and walked her to his office at the back of the building. The room was lit up like a Christmas tree until they disappeared. Then the showroom lights went out. The set lights were still on, and I could see light coming from his office. The showroom door was open when I tried it. That cocky bastard didn't even bother to ensure their privacy. I crept to the door, but they would not have heard me even if I had been wearing forged boots. I heard him threatening her to send the photo to me if she didn't do what he told her to do. I was in an almost perfect observation position. He ordered her to clean up and get dressed, which she did. Before she left, she said, "I think Gimpy suspects something. He used to question me after work about every minute I was late, where I was and who I was with, etc. But now he's stopped doing that, and it's worrying me that he might be planning something. I can't be late home on Friday or Saturday this week. Anyway, I want to end this affair now before it goes too far. You've been enjoying me for the last 2 weeks. No. Can you just leave me alone and give me a chance to fix my marriage? I love my kids, and I don't want them to suffer. If only I wouldn't let you take those damn photos." He looked like he had been hit. Pulling her closer, he hissed angrily, loud enough for me to hear. "Listen, bitch, you're mine, and you will be until I tell you to. I'm not ready to stop with you, and I have plans to extend our party for next Wednesday, so you must come on time. You will entertain me and some of my friends, and then perhaps I will leave you for a while." She fell to her knees and wrapped her arms around his legs, and I watched as she begged him not to give her away to his friends like some cheap item. He laughed and said, "You're a woman of easy virtue. You know that once you get into it, you'll accept anyone, and you'll perform next week like the woman of easy virtue that you are." After that, she let him go and remained on her knees, crying. He pulled her to her feet and said, "Go home. You have 20 minutes left before he starts to get suspicious. When you get home, I want you to put Gimpy to bed and insist that he make love to you. You don't have to anymore. Get yourself in order, got it?" She nodded and wiped her tears with a tissue from her bag. He kissed her again. I left them hugging and returned home to wait for her return. Mary was waiting for me with Andy. It was a surprise, but from their flushed faces I could tell they were doing more than just talking. I briefly confirmed that she was sleeping with Bullet and was going to do it again next Wednesday. They both insisted that I wait until next Wednesday to talk to her. Andy said, "I know you, Jimpai. You want to go in there and beat his brains out, but you've got 2 small children and a house with a mortgage to maintain. The last thing you can afford is to end up behind bars for this bastard." It was one thing to understand that he was right, but rage was seething inside me. He was right, and I wanted revenge on him, her. They both kept asking me to promise that I wouldn't do anything to make her realize that I knew she was unfaithful. I promised, but I wasn't sure if I could sit quietly with this knowledge and not say anything. Holly returned home from a night of bingo and was all smiles. She came over and kissed me, and I played into her hand when she wanted to go to bed. The next day after work, I met Andy, and over a pint, we chatted about what happened in the showroom. He said, "Next Wednesday, Mr. Barnes will receive a visit from some of your friends. You need to provide yourself with an ironclad alibi. I suggest you visit the King's Head and stay there from 8 to 10:15. Make sure you are noticed and try to act like it. It's like you don't have a single worry in the world." He didn't say more, but personally, I wanted to deal with Barnes myself, but I was touched that he was willing to take it on for me. I told him about the photographs that were used to blackmail Holly. This does not excuse her. She could have come to me, but she did not. Instead, she went back to him, and from what I saw, she was more than willing to do anything to please him. Andy and I developed a plan that would point to me, so my alibi was important to my eventual release. The days until next Wednesday passed slowly. Holly left for work as usual, and I didn't mention that she was late both evenings. I noticed she was wearing a corset and asked where she got it. I knew Barnes had given it to her and was listening more out of curiosity to see how she would explain it when she said, "It's not a corset, it's called a basque, and I bought it by mail from a catalog. I thought it would help diversify our sex life. I couldn't argue against that. She really looked very sexy in it, and even more so when she slowly started taking off her skirt and stockings instead of her tights. I asked, "When did you start wearing stockings to work?" Tights don't match the peplum, plus it comes with ready-made garters for stockings. When I decided to wear the peplum tonight, I just had to complete the look with a full set. I was going to save it just for us, but it was so pretty, and I felt so sexy that I couldn't resist teasing clients with a random look at my stockings. Finally, Wednesday came, and I could hardly work that day. My thoughts were on what was going to happen during the night. Mary came to look after the children, and I went to the meeting at the King's Head. I tried to communicate with everyone I knew who was there. It helped take my mind off what was happening elsewhere. Around 9:30, Andy walked into the pub, caught my eye, smiled, and nodded. We found a corner table, and he told me everything. We arrived on time to see Holly enter the showroom. When the door remained open, we decided to follow it, but another car arrived and two people also entered the showroom. After waiting 10 minutes, we went inside, putting on our balaclavas, and walked to the office door. Everyone inside was surprised when we burst in and did not resist when we tied them up. Andy continued. He thought we had come to rob him and pointed to the safe. We emptied the safe to convince him of this. I told him that blackmailing others for your own purposes was wrong. We sat him down at the table, and he began to beg us about mercy, offering anything. He even offered us Holly. We had to hurry, as his screams could be heard. We left Holly's photo and clothes at the place for the police. Mary met her. She was shocked and silent the whole way. Saying thank you didn't seem right, so I grabbed him and hugged him before leaving. I went home to find Mary and a fully dressed Holly waiting for me. By this time I was pretty drunk, but not so drunk that I couldn't speak. Your clothes are in the case by the door. Now please go away. I arranged for Mary to pack some essentials for her, while Holly and I were busy with other things. She tried to beg me to let her stay, but I screamed at her, "Just get out now. I don't want to hear your lies anymore. Please leave, or I'll throw your traitorous ass out on the street." She left, and I guess she went home to her parents' house, because less than half an hour passed before her mother was on the line shouting insults at me. Thanks to them, I calmed down a little, so I let her continue ranting, and when she finally stopped to catch her breath, I said, "Talk to your daughter. Ask her where she was tonight and who was with her, just in case she doesn't want to explain it to you. She cheated on me with Pool Barnes and has been cheating on me for the last few weeks." Then I hung up and the phone didn't ring again that night. Mary stopped and helped me get the kids ready for school. She would take them and take care of them today, but I knew I would need to address this issue quickly. If Holly and I ended, I knew that in all likelihood she would get the kids and the house, but the immediate problem was what I would do the next day and every day until I was ready to talk to Holly again and come to some kind of agreement. I was practical enough to know that we would have to meet and discuss the practicalities of the situation sooner rather than later. Financially, we had no money for anything other than parenting, so Holly had to continue being a stay-at-home mom for the foreseeable future. I got stuck at work and brought back up to date the lag caused by yesterday's busyness. I was having lunch when a police car pulled up to the construction site. Two bobbies appeared and purposefully walked towards the porticabin that served as my office. They asked if I was Charles Givens, and when I confirmed that I was, they asked if I could accompany them to the station. I asked them why, and the bigger one said, "Do you know Mr. Arthur Barnes?" When I confirmed this, he said, "We need to talk to you about the attack on Mr. Paul Barnes that happened last night. Will you come with us voluntarily, or should we arrest you?" I said that I would follow them in my car and got up to leave. They told me they would take me to the station, and the younger one pulled out a pair of handcuffs. I stated that I was willing to accompany them voluntarily and that they had not arrested me, so there was no need to restrain me. The more experienced, older cop must have felt that his colleague was being overzealous, so he relented and said, "Do you mind if I sit next to you on the way to the station?" Apparently, he was worried about me leaving town or something, so I told him I was fine with it. At least when I'm released, I'll have my own transport. At the police station, I was taken into an interview room and Detective Sergeant Munro, a stern Scot, asked me a few questions before getting down to business. I told him exactly where I was last night, and he took some notes. He showed me a photo of Holly with bullet barns and asked me to confirm that she was my wife, which I did. The questions went on and on. Do I know she's having an affair? I confirmed that I did. Did I conspire to cause grievous bodily harm to Mr. Barnes? I denied my involvement, and so on and so forth. I was released around 7 in the evening. I think my alibi was correct, and they couldn't find anything that could connect me to the criminals, otherwise I would have been detained. As I was about to get into my van to go home, Sergeant Munro caught me and said, "Son, you and I both know you orchestrated this, and I will do whatever it takes to prove it." Speaking personally and off the record, that bastard got what was coming to him, but I think physically hurting him was a little overkill, wasn't it? I said, I wasn't there, so I don't know how he is. Got injured, but to answer your question, if I had been there, I wouldn't have stopped with just one broken knee. I believe that my wife may not have been the first woman he blackmailed into having sex with him. Good luck with your investigation. Whoever did this did me a big favor last night. When I returned home, my children greeted me and demanded to know when their mother would be coming home. I told them I'm not sure yet, but soon. Mary appeared and ushered them into the bedroom, leaving me face to face with not only my mother, but Holly's mother as well. This time they presented a united front. My mother told me in no uncertain terms that I needed to let Holly return to her family home and that I needed to sit down and discuss our differences. I didn't argue with them, but said, "She hurt me in ways I can't explain. I don't know if we can ever be together again, and I feel a terrible rage building inside me. I want her to feel just a little of the pain she caused me recently. Just knowing that she's suffering because she made me suffer is irrational, but I can't just forgive and forget." Her mother said, "She is suffering, believe me. She has been crying since she showed up on our doorstep last night. When we heard the story from her, she saw the look on her father's face when she admitted cheating, and it hurt her. Believe me, she was always closer to him than me." I took a deep breath and said, "Did you know that Holly never said she loved me? Considering the circumstances of our wedding and all, at first I didn't find it surprising and thought that she would love me like I loved her, but she never changed and never told me that she loved me. Of course, she was a wonderful mother to our two children and until recently a kind and caring partner, but never a loving wife. Until recently, I had no reason to doubt her fidelity, and if she wants a divorce from her true first love, then I will not stand in her way." Holly's mother asked my mother if she could talk to me alone. My mother was a little reluctant, but nodded and left to join her grandchildren. I heard them playing in the other room when Mrs. Carter Miller turned to me and said, "We never saw eye to eye, you and I, did we? I was so upset with you when you and Holly had to get married, and I blamed you for it. Now I understand that I was wrong, and not only that, you turned out to be a wonderful father and a good provider for your family. There's no denying that you love Holly so much. I've seen the way your eyes follow her when you're together and how you try to please her." She paused for a moment and continued, "You said you want her to suffer, and I'm going to tell you something that will do just that. Once I tell you what it is, you will have the power to seriously hurt her deeper than she hurt you, believe me. But I don't think you will ever use this information as I believe you are too kind and considerate a person to stoop to such depths for the sake of simple revenge. I think you're doing Holly an injustice by thinking she doesn't love you, but on the contrary, she loves you very much, and I think recent events have made her realize that too late. It's up to you." Another deep pause, and then she said, "When Roy and I were married for about 3 years, I had an affair. It was stupid of me, and I almost immediately regretted it. The result of this connection was Holly. Roy is not her real father, she doesn't know, and I don't think Roy ever realized. I hope with all my heart that when she finds out, she won't tell him, because I love him very much. If you want to make her suffer even more than she is currently hurting, you have the power to do just that. Of course, this will cause me and Roy a lot of heartache, but I'm willing to put up with it if that's what you need to give her another chance. Think carefully before you act, because you may reap more than you sow." With these words, she left me, and my mother returned. She didn't have to say a word. I knew what she was thinking. I asked if she could stay with the kids for a couple of hours, followed Mrs. Korchmiller, and offered to take her home. She agreed, and I had to smile when she saw the beat-up old van that was to be her transport. "Don't worry, he'll get us there safely," I said. She looked at the van, then back at me and answered flatly, "You know, I've been in a worse situation. Roy and I were lucky, but we started life in very humble circumstances. My family used to live in apartment buildings near the shipyard gatehouse. Shared toilet on the landing and a tin bathtub for soaking in front of the fireplace once a week, whether we needed it or not. So don't worry, as long as it's reliable, it will work for me." Once in the van, she quietly said, "Before, I would have been very arrogant and would have refused your offer, but last night made me realize what a bitch I was to you, and I came to apologize and beg you to find some forgiveness in your heart." I could offer nothing in response to this request. I went to her house in silence. We were both in deep thought. I realized that what she had told me posed a great risk to the present and future happiness of her family, and she was betting that I would respect her trust, and thereby at least try to save my marriage. I knew I couldn't hurt Holly or Roy like that, no matter how much I wanted her to suffer. It would be pointless to use this information pointlessly just to harm Holly. There was too much disagreement in other directions. Her confession made me take another look at my marriage and admit to myself that I needed to try, if only for the sake of the children. Due to our financial circumstances, divorce or separation was not an option. Either of these options would put me in a terrible situation. I will need to find a place to live and also support my family. The mortgage was pushing us to the limit, and the prospect of finding a better-paying job was impossible. Mr. Miller was waiting for us and called Holly down the stairs. Roy and his wife quietly left us, closing the door tightly. Holly entered the room and paused, hesitating whether to approach me or wait for me to make the first move. I took the first step and asked her to sit down. We sat in silence for several minutes, and finally I said, "I've changed my mind and would like you to come home. Children ask all the time when you will come home, and it is for this reason, and for no other reason, that I want you to come back. Realize that you never loved me. The events of the last few weeks have convinced me of this. It's very difficult for me to understand why you prefer him over me, but as long as you hide it, you can continue to see him. However, you must never bring him to our home, otherwise I will not be held responsible for my actions. Roy Jr. And Sarah will have to share a room for now since you and I won't be sleeping together. I'll move into Sarah's room tonight, and you can move her things sometime tomorrow." I stopped, and she sat down, lowered her head, and muttered something. I reached out and lifted her head, tears streaming down her face, and I asked her to say it again. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "You don't have to worry about Pool Barnes and I seeing him again. I never loved him, and I know it now." I had this wild fantasy about our previous relationship and what might have happened if I hadn't gotten pregnant with Roy. He realized that I was still in love with him and took advantage of it. "I know I never told you that I love you. I always cared for you very much and was faithful to you until recently, but my last 2 meetings with Bullet made me realize how much I love you. The dream lover, I thought he was in my fantasies, and he was just using me for his own gratification. I think he was stalking me and using me to get some kind of pleasure from sex with the woman you married and make you a cuckold. I imagine he would eventually do something so outrageous that you would find out he slept with me and force you to answer. If that were the case, you would end up in jail one way or another. Instead, you found out before he was fully ready, and I don't know how you didn't react the way he expected you to. You weren't the one who beat him up." It was a lot, and I needed to think about what she said, so I said, "Let's wait until we get home and continue the discussion there." I called her parents and told them that Holly and I were going home together. I also told them that we had a lot of challenges to overcome before we could be husband and wife again, but we were both determined to try. Relief flashed across their faces, and they asked us to let them know if we needed help. Marriage counselors used to be few and far between, and families were much more closely knit than they are now. At home, Holly made tea, and I told Mum and Mary what was going on. Mom, as usual, gave a parting word, telling us both, "Please do not take the easy option of divorce. Take as much time as you need to try to get back together. You have two small children to think about, and acting hastily now could leave you with years of regret." After Mom and Mary left, Holly sat down with me to continue our conversation. She repeated her question about whether I beat her lover. I chose my words carefully and said, I had no part in what happened to him. The injuries he received were, in my opinion, well-deserved. He was lucky that I wasn't there and that he survived. The police have more or less indicated that you are not the first woman he has used as a personal prostitute. Holly's face turned red when she heard the bitterness in my answer. I was surprised. I thought she would have cried and begged me to forgive her for her indiscretion, but she maintained her composure, and when I quickly reviewed our conversations that day, she never asked for my forgiveness. I challenged her on this, and she angrily responded, "What about your novels? Are you even going to mention them, or is it all up to me?" "What novels?" I thundered back. "I never cheated on you, you know that. What brought this crazy idea into your head? A couple of months ago, I walked into your office, and you weren't there, so I asked one of the guys where you were, and he said you were at No. 5 to sort out some plumbing problem. The guy stood with his friend, and they pushed each other and looked at me. I told them I would go there and find you. The bigger one said, 'You better knock loudly first if you don't want to get caught. They do more than just plug the leak.' And then they both laughed before his mate said, 'Some of these married ladies have just moved in, and Gimpy personally takes care of their problems, if you know what I mean.' And the first one came closer to me and whispered, 'If you are looking for someone who can put out the fire, then Bobby and I have the right size hose for you.' I ran away from this office and practically ran to number 5 and looked inside by the window. You were lying on your back under the sink, and this lady was standing over you, legs spread wide. Don't tell me you didn't sleep with her. A brief memory of the woman, and no. 5 reminded me of this incident. I was lucky to get out of there alive. I couldn't find the leak she was complaining about, and I had to lie down on the floor to see the siphon connection when she started unzipping my jeans. I realized what she really needed and got out of there as quickly as I could. I explained all this to Holly and saw that she was fighting with herself whether to believe me or not. My patience was wearing thin, so I growled at her. "So you're the one who justifies sleeping with Barnes. Well, if you had waited a few more minutes, you would have seen me walk out of her house like my ass was on fire." Now she began to sob. "No, I will never have any excuse for this, but when he showed me those photos, I thought, if you can cheat, then why can't I? This is no consolation to you, but the way these guys spoke, I really thought that you regularly visited house number 5. If you say that you didn't cheat, then I believe you, and I'm sorry for doubting you. I'm also sorry that I cheated on you, and I hope we can find a way to get back to what we had before. I learned the hard way that I love you, and it took my infidelity to make me realize it." After saying all that, she started crying, and I started to reach out to her, but mental images of her damn Barnes were right at the forefront of my thoughts, and that stopped me. By her own admission, she had a blast with him and was ready for more. Turning my back to her crying figure, I said, "Today I will sleep on the sofa, and you can take the bedroom." This is how I spent the first night after our confrontation. Sarah and Roy were not too happy about having to share a room, and this led to almost daily quarrels between them over some issues, real or imagined. Holly applied to Badger and agreed to work in December. I noticed that she dressed more conservatively and tried to be home within 20 minutes of leaving. Of course, she never returned home later than midnight. I moved into Sarah's room and Holly and I barely spoke that first week. In the weeks that followed, we circled each other like two wary animals, trying to decide who was in charge. It was as if we were both trying to avoid saying or doing something that would cause the other more pain. When she stopped working, we immediately felt the pinch. My painting orders had dried up, and without her salary to supplement our income, we were in serious financial trouble. I wanted her to sell the Mini, but she argued that she would probably need it if she managed to find another job. I understood her point of view, but I didn't want to give her the victory, so we argued about it almost every night. She also started attending Mass every week. We didn't go to church much before, but we were both raised Catholic, but I didn't go with her. Easter was approaching, and one evening, when the children had already gone to bed, Holly finally snapped and attacked me. How much longer will we live like this? We don't have a marriage. We never talk about what happened. And as for forgiveness, forget it. You come over after work and always seem to take me on the moral high ground. I admit that I am the one who ruined our marriage, but I can't continue like this. Either you start trying to understand and discuss our problems like two adults, or I think it would be better for you to admit that you will find the strength in your heart to forgive me and move on. This sharply escalated the situation. We had another non-argument, when you shoot at each other without getting to the root of the issue. We have exhausted ourselves, and the dispute has dried up. Holly asked conciliatory, "It's Easter Sunday this weekend. Why don't you come to Mass with me and the kids?" The previous arguments had tired me out, and I really didn't want to start a new one, so I thought about what to lose and agreed. So we all went to Mass, and I prayed for the first time in years, but there was no blinding light for me. It was just nice to be a family again. I watched my son and daughter pray and loved them for their innocence and complete faith that God would hear their prayers. At the exit, the priest stood and greeted everyone leaving the church. He shook my hand and said quietly, "You look worried. If you would like someone to talk to, I am usually available most mornings after Mass. Otherwise, you can always seek advice from a higher authority." He smiled and raised his eyes to the sky. I smiled at him and shook my head, but at this stage I was ready to try anything. I agreed with Holly. It was my responsibility to sort out my problems. No help from above was coming to me. That night I sat with Holly and said, "I'd like to go back to our room, if that's okay. I don't know if I will ever be able to love you again or trust you, be the same as we were, but today I realized that living separately in the same house will not work. You have no idea how much I want everything to be good between us. I once loved you with all my heart, and even now I have no idea where I went wrong. Every time I look at you, all I see in my mind is an image of you and Barnes, damn it, and you're clearly enjoying it. But I want to try to overcome this, and maybe with your help we can do it, ready to try." Holly walked over to me, knelt down and put her hands on my hips. With tears in her eyes, she said, "You didn't do anything wrong, except maybe love me too much. I thought a lot about why and when everything changed. Until Bullet came back into my life, you and our children were my life. I let my lust get the better of me and allowed my fantasies of youth and freedom from responsibilities to weave a web of resentment that we needed to get married. I don't mean it like that. I don't have the right words, but our sex life was good, very good. I just let this permissiveness on your part get out of control. I should never have agreed to that stunt with my bra, and letting Pula take some liberties in front of witnesses was just stupid, and I want to try to prove to you that I love you and make us a family again." She was crying now, and I picked her up and sat her on my lap, wiping her tears with my rough hands. "Let's go to sleep," I said. By the time she came out of the toilet, I was already undressed and lying in bed. She decided to wear a simple nightgown that I had given her years ago. As you understand, any gift of this kind from a husband to his wife will not be modest, and this was no exception. We made love that night. God, but the next morning I felt so good. The children burst in and demanded to know where Dad was. When they saw me lying with their mother, they smiled and jumped on the bed and on both of us. Children are more perceptive than you think. Roy was only 6 years old, but he was fully aware that his mother and I had separated. He never really asked about it, and we thought he was too young to appreciate how important it was, but his face when he saw us together disproved that notion. He squeezed between us and called for Sarah to join, which she did. I won't say things were easy between us after that. There were times when I retreated into my shell and images were at the forefront of my thoughts, but as our trust grew they became fewer, although they never completely disappeared. Our luck seemed to change when we met again. The walls of the shack I worked in were decorated with all the usual girly page 3 pinups. One day, Holly came to me about something and suggested that I hang one of her paintings of her instead. I took her advice and installed one of her more risque paintings, as well as a painting of our house in winter, surrounded by snow and slush. This was something I was particularly proud of, and when our director came in and informed me that I would be moving into a new prestigious estate as a property manager, he noted that both paintings generated a lot of interest in Holly's painting. He asked who the model was, and I admitted that she was my wife. He told me I was lucky, and then spent even more time with another painting. He asked if I could draw from the drawings, and I had to ask what he meant, and he explained. The new estate was to consist mainly of 4-bedroom luxury homes. All the construction drawings were prepared, and he wanted to know if I could give various impressions of what the completed site would look like, landscaped and occupied. I told him I had never tried anything like this before, but I was willing to give it a try. He said, "These impressions will be used in our promotional brochures and promotional material appearing in the press and trade magazines. Therefore, it is imperative that they showcase our product in the best possible light, but they must be consistent with a design concept. The first home to be built will be a show home with a salesperson present in the evenings and on weekends. If demand is as forecast, I won't have to hire a salesperson for a week. Do you know anyone who would be interested in this job?" Without hesitation, I said, "What about Holly, the girl in the picture? She is very smart and knows how to communicate well. I'm confident that with some training, she can do it successfully." He looked at the painting again and said, "Ask her to come to me tomorrow. The first house is still a few months away from being completed, but we can use this time to learn." So lucky, Holly got the job and excelled at it. I was paid well for the shows, and this led to further commissions. The doctor's wife liked to be considered a patron of the arts and insisted that I paint her portrait in the same spirit as the one hanging on the cabin wall. But that's another story. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. 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 Click to the